The lady stared at the Green Knight in disbelief. Peace. You want to talk about peace? The Green Man nodded. I do. I grow tired of this war between us. It doesn't help either of our causes, and it's time we brought it to an end. The lady looked at her old enemy with a distinct level of distrust. When we stood upon the plains of Vanar, a place I can scarcely remember now, you told me that you would not stop until one of us was ashes in time. The Green Man laughed, sketching a small bow. My lady, I am weary of this conflict. It gains us nothing to fight. It only weakens us. It is time we ended this conflict and had peace amongst us. Tobias came up behind her, whispering something in her ear. The two held a quiet conversation as her other Brandylow got into position to defend their mistress if it came to it. Grandpa and his party stood ready too, and Dr. Winters and her mate had made a sort of triangle around the big knight. The big warrior was alone, though the presence of the Winter Court might have made him feel a little more secure. The warden was still over by the refreshment table, watching it all unfold, as his interest in joining the fight was still unknown. Still, without an army at his back, the defenders of the garden felt confident that they could vanquish him, just as they had last time. Mab, said a regal voice from behind the lady, this is most unusual. What are you up to? Titania had her arms crossed over her chest as she glowered at Queen Mab, the other darkening as she became angry. You dare accuse me of... But the Green Man stepped in front of her. My apologies, Queen of Summer, but I felt it might be best if this request was brought before both courts. The lady and I have a feud that has lasted for centuries, and if it is ever to end, then it will not be ended without the promise of safe conduct. Safe conduct, the lady said, laughing without any real mirth. The last time you promised me safe conduct, you turned me into a statue. That was war, my lady. What I am suggesting is peace, to our mutual benefit. What do you say? Will you hear my terms? The lady looked at her Brandylow, Tobias, Randy, and Sam, but Randy just shrugged at her. Couldn't hurt to hear him out, I reckon, Randy said. Besides, Sam put in, if we don't like what he has to say, we can just toss him out of the party. The lady turned back to her old adversary. Very well, then. Speak your piece. 7 days hence, on the eve of the new year, I want to meet you here in your domain and sign peace accords. At the heart of your power, the lady said skeptically, on the anniversary of my defeat at your hands. I have spent the year contemplating my revenge and my defeat, and I have decided again that it would be pointless to retaliate. Clearly, you are the stronger warrior, and I have no desire to fight with you again. The lady glanced back at those assembled behind her, the ones who had fought with her in the War of Winter, and nodded after some deliberation. Very well. Queen Mab, do you promise safe conduct for such a signing? Queen Mab smiled. I do not, lady. These are not court matters, and are matters between vassals. I will say this, she said, looking at the Green Man. If you attempt some mischief and are unsuccessful, then I will banish you from my court, and you will no longer have the protection of winter. You will be adrift within this world, behoven only to yourself, unless Titania manages to scoop you up. Titania laughed. I fear my court is too warm for such a warrior. He would melt within the heart of summer. The Green Man looked back at her and seemed to weigh the warning for a moment. Grandpa sucked in a breath, seeing more in that look than anyone else there, but it fled as quickly as it had come. Agreed. I will see you in 7 days, my lady. Until then." He bowed low and backed out the way he had come, leaving the party a twitter with excited chatter. The lady worried at her lip again, looking back at the group that was still gathered behind her. Some of them were friends, others barely allies, and some of them complete strangers, but the lady felt they were her best hope. She did not for a second believe that her old adversary had turned over a new leaf, and she would need all the help that she could get if he sprung a trap this year. "Please, everyone, return to the party. Let us not let this evening's events put a pall over the evening's festivities." They turned slowly back to their conversations, but it was clear that the party was at an end. "If I hold a council," she said, turning back to the group, "would you come?" "Of course," Grandpa said. "We'll be there," Dr. Winter agreed, her eyes sliding to the warden. "Anything for my allies," he answered, sounding bored. "We'll be there too," said Sam and Randy and Tobias, nodding in turn. "And me," John said. "I want to help as well." The lady smiled. "Thank you. I'll see you all in 2 days, around lunchtime. Let us convene then and form a plan for this meeting." The party broke up not long after, the Fae begging off and leaving the lady with her children and her allies from the town. In the end, she supposed she had known that they would be the ones that she would have to depend on. "Are you sure this is wise, Gramps?" Marcus asked. "Why wouldn't it be?" Grandpa said, coughing a little as he cleared the phlegm from his throat. Glimmer had said her goodbyes after the party, returning to the camp with her people. She made Marcus promise to call her if anything came up, and said that she would visit him after the meeting to get all the details. She departed for the woods after giving him a very heated kiss, leaving Marcus a little flustered. John had said his goodbyes as well, telling them he would see them at the meeting, and now it was just the two of them in the cab of Grandpa's truck as they rode home through the Christmas Eve snow. "Well, you sound a little rough, and we barely made it out with our skins the last time." "Pish-posh! What happened to all that coming into your power nonsense from earlier?" Marcus gripped the steering wheel a little harder. "It's been a year since I've been in his presence, Grandpa. I convinced myself that it was from the heat of battle, but he's very intimidating." Grandpa nodded. "He isn't that, kiddo, but we can't back down. This is our backyard, and the lady is our friend. If we don't help her, then what sort of neighbors would we be?" "The bad kind, I guess," Marcus said, turning left as they headed up the mountain. Outside, the snow was coming down in white trails, and he was a little worried that the truck might not be able to handle the climb. The road was becoming lost amongst all that white, and Marcus had to guess where it was more than once. "Say we don't help her," Grandpa said, thumping his cane on the floor of the old truck. "Say the green man somehow pulls off something and takes over the garden. I wouldn't want that old spook so close to my hearth. Would you?" Marcus shook his head. "No, I suppose not." "In that case, it seems our hands are tied," Grandpa said. "Do you imagine the others will feel the same?" Grandpa smiled. "Dr. Winters and her partner will, for certain. I'd stake my life on that. John will, too. He said as much. The warden might, and the Brandylow certainly will. That's got to count for something." "Yeah, I suppose it does," Marcus said with a little snort. "But get some rest," Grandpa advised. "You'll need your strength for what's to come later." "And you need a breathing treatment," Grandpa said as they pulled up into the yard. Grandpa pulled a sour face, but he couldn't really argue. "Are you going to the meeting?" Pamela had been taking off her party dress and getting into something more comfortable when Marguerite ventured the question. Pamela hadn't really thought about it. She had assumed that she would. She was the town's representative in matters like this. Unelected, but still involved. She had a duty to the town and needed to help them. If the green man meant to do something underhanded, then she owed it to the lady to help her. I had intended to, yes. And you will go with them when they make the negotiations? Well, of course. Marguerite nodded. Good. I was hoping you would. They may need you. Do you imagine your brother will go? Pamela shrugged. Who can say what that old villain will do? I know he and the lady have some sort of deal worked out, so I just assumed that he would come too. I like her, Marguerite said, smiling. She reminds me of you. You two have a lot in common. Pamela laughed. That's flattering, but she's on a whole different level than I am. True, Marguerite said, wrapping her arms around the doctor's neck. But the two of you care deeply for this town. She is not, how you say, without faults, but she has made this place her home, and as you have. She sometimes takes from the town, but so do we all, no? Dr. Winters nodded. Maggie had a point. Dr. Winters was not guiltless in that either. She collected the people in the town together, helping them forget their problems and helping them get over their trauma, but she knew that wasn't all there was to it. In a way, Dr. Winters, the winter part of it, was just stocking her pantry with her favorite foods. Inside the good doctor, there was a parasite that wanted to feed, but there was also a woman who wanted to protect. Those sides were often at war with each other, but more often than not, she found a strange sort of harmony between them. It was odd to have such a duality within you, but such was her life. Now, Maggie said, kissing her cheek, come to bed, you. It's a little early for bed, isn't it? Pamela laughed. I am not speaking of sleeping, Maggie said, and her words made a flush creep up Pamela's neck. She went to bed, unable to fight this pull any more than the warring of personalities within her. Such was life. The warden stood on his catwalk again, watching the snow fall lazily on the ground. They would be in it tomorrow, he knew. The inmates turned into the children they often acted like when the snow fell, and tomorrow they would hold rec period, and it would be full of snowball fights and snowmen with the kind of breasts that you often saw on pin-up girls, and trips to the infirmary when his charges got a little too exuberant and slipped on the ice, and a lot of laughter and joy. He grimaced, feeling a bit like the Grinch as he thought of it all. He'd have indigestion tomorrow, that was for a certainty. The whiskey in the glass was something expensive, not the cheap Walmart swill that had mediated the palaver between the sheriff and his Jacob Marley. It might as well have been piss tonight, because the warden couldn't make it do much more than swirl and swirl and swirl. He saw the years and the miles and the conquests and the defeats in that swirling wave of amber liquid, and it made him long to send it tumbling into the woods that surrounded the prison. The moon was full overhead, a bloated egg ready to burst, and he looked up at it and sighed. They would expect him at the meeting. Of course they would. Well, they wouldn't, but she would. The lady and he had maintained a steady alliance for nearly a year, and he wanted to keep it that way. Until these, whatever they were, could be cleaned out of his death house, he needed her to take care of the death row inmates for him. As it stood, they were being held in Quad 2 of confinement, the recently renovated spot where the creatures had lain dormant for so many years. But therein lay the problem, too. He was giving her 2 a month, and despite his best efforts, not nearly enough people had death sentences to keep up that bargain. Sure, he could keep it up for another 3 months. It had been a good year for provable homicide, and the governor did like to appear firm on criminals. But he was going to have to start culling lifers soon. Killing sick sheep was one thing, but mutton from his own table was another. "Que sera, sera," he whispered, draining the glass and throwing it into the woods, a toss of about 2.5 miles or more. He heard it shatter, but as he tracked its movement, he saw something. Someone was on the edge of the woods. Someone was standing beside the freshly fallen snow and looking back at him. He was up and in the air before he could stop himself. He pulled glamour around him so the people that were in the yard wouldn't think they had lost their shit, and he was flapping his wings and eating up the sky as he rocketed towards the tree line. If they saw him, the warden's presence didn't seem to bother them. He landed gracefully, kicking up snow as he came down on a knee, and as the glamour fell away, he saw someone that he hadn't thought about in quite some time. "You? What the hell are you doing here?" The hair was long, the clothes were more leather than fabric, and the man's face was gaunter than it had been the last time that he had seen him, but the warden would have recognized Marcus Reese anywhere. Reese, the only inmate to date to have successfully escaped his prison, at least that he knew of. He had thought Reese was dead. Most of them died if they made it to the woods, but after that cryptic little message last year, the warden hadn't been so sure. Maybe others had escaped. Maybe they hadn't been killed in the woods like he had believed. Maybe the creatures that lived there were losing their touch. "Just scouting the land. It's important to get a lay of the land before a battle," the man said, his voice raspy from disuse. The warden laughed. "Oh, are we having a battle? I had no idea." "That was kind of the point," Reese said, from the depths of his hood. "Don't worry, though. You will soon. It's taken a lot of work, but I finally got the numbers shored up, and I believe this is the year that we take out Stragview for good." The warden rolled his eyes. "Be my guest. You wouldn't be the first. I think you'll find that the prison has more secrets than you give it credit for." Reese smiled. "As does the forest." Behind him, the eyes of 100 squinting terrors came to life. The warden was rarely scared, but he felt a little uneasy as those eyes fell on him. They were in the trees, they were thick on the ground, and Reese did not seem terribly worried about them. "Your new friends probably forgot to mention that we have a peace accord from long before you were born. They've been my friends since I came to this place, so very long ago, and they have long protected the prison." "So they have, but they tell me that your offerings have been less frequent lately. No one is escaping your cage. You haven't fed them in a long, long time. I made them a better offer, and they decided to take it." "Oh? Do tell." "They want fresh meat. They want what's in your prison. They want to be allowed to roam outside the woods. And I suppose Santa is just going to bring it to them in his sleigh, is he?" The growling from the woods was loud and low, and as the nightmare creatures began to stalk around him, the warden's smile became a scowl. "Oh no. Like all good things, we'll take what we want. Our numbers grow, Warden, while yours appear to dwindle. I suppose you'll just have to come and see, won't you?" "Soon," Reese said, backing into the woods as the beasties came on. "We have nothing but time. Do you?" They surged forward, but the warden was already skyward again. They didn't dare come too far from the forest, or so he believed. They had never dared come closer than the road, but as he pushed for the sky, he was in for a surprise. One of those shiny black terrors shot out of the trees and clamped onto his leg. It dangled from him, bearing down on him as he swung there, and the warden hissed as he dealt the creature a blow across the head that caved it in like an old soda can. He shook him off as the thing fell to earth in a heap, and the warden was clear before any more surprises could befall him. Well, not quite. When he landed on the catwalk of his tower, his leg buckled, and he fell hard onto the metal grating. He looked down and saw the pant leg of his suit was oozing a dark, viscous substance. He just stared at it for a moment. not sure what to make of it. He had been hurt. Nothing had hurt him in a long time. The longer he looked at it, the more he realized that he would have to do something. The first thing was that he would have to go back on something that he had never intended to make good on. And the other was that he would have to go to this meeting in a few days. If the wolf was truly at the door, then he would need friends all the more. They convened on December 27th, but the meeting was postponed temporarily due to a lack of space. Randy and Sam had intended to have it in the security building, but when Grandpa and Marcus had arrived promptly at noon, and the space was already feeling cramped, they decided to find a bigger venue. The greenhouse was no better, the ladies' office was too small as well, and finally, they decided on a picnic area near the 9 o'clock display area. Attendance was non-existent. The cold was keeping people indoors. And as Grandpa and Marcus took their seats, John called out to the group. He had seen the note they had left on the door and went looking for them, and Dr. Winters was coming along not far behind him. The warden arrived just before the lady, seeming to appear in the picnic area from thin air, and limping as he came to rest on a picnic bench. When the lady came to sit on one of the tables, she seemed pleased with the turnout. "We all know why we're here," she said, looking around at the assembled folks. "Once again, our town is threatened, and it may soon be up to us to put aside another incursion by the Green Man. The Moon Elves have decided not to come this time, though I suppose your glimmer might break from tradition," she said, looking at Marcus. "Unless expressly forbidden by the Queen, she'll be there. I'm not even sure that would stop her in this case. She hates that she missed all the fun last time." "Fun isn't exactly what I would have called it," said Dr. Winter, "though I suppose Moon Elves' fun may be different. Speaking of, Doctor, will your charming companion be joining us?" Winter nodded. "She has an aversion to sun, however, so she won't be at the meeting today." The lady nodded. "Very well. Does anyone else have someone not present who will be joining us for the battle?" No other hands went up, so she nodded and went on. "Very well. My Brandylow have been assessing the defenses of the park for the last few days, and they have compiled a report that I think might be helpful." She stepped aside, motioning for Randy to come forward. He came hesitantly, not seeming to like being the center of attention, and his drawl was worse than usual when he spoke. "Well, we have the walls, of course. I think they would find them hard to plant an ambush over, and the other Brandylow have agreed to a man that they will be manning them during the meeting to make sure no one comes over them. There are the Guardians as well, the big tree guys that some of you saw last year, and the gnomes, the little bearded fellas. They have agreed to keep an eye out too. At least I think they have. The Guardians don't talk much, and I can't understand a damn thing the gnomes say." "They will fight," the lady said. There was a galumphing noise not too far away, and she bent down to pick something up. As she straightened, there was a collective gasp when they saw it was a little pumpkin with stubby legs and a jack-o'-lantern face stretched into a smiling pant. He made a happy little noise as he bumped her hand like some weird cat, and she seemed surprised when she saw that she had their undivided attention. "What?" she asked. "What is that? And where can I get one?" asked Dr. Winters. "Oh, this is my Gordling. He doesn't usually come out when it's cold, but he misses me when I'm away from the greenhouse." "How did you make that?" Grandpa asked, leaning closer. "I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that." "I kind of made it by accident," the lady admitted, "but he's such a dear thing that I hated to see him suffer in the cold." Randy cleared his throat. So, as I was saying, I feel as if our defenses are enough to thwart an attack if it should come from the outside. Inside will be our problem, of course, but I feel like we can handle it if anything gets in. So, the lady said, the plan is to meet at sunset here on December 31st. We can set up so that we're ready for anything he might have planned. With any luck, his intentions are pure, and we have nothing to fear. Fat chance of that, Grandpa said, and Marcus nodded. If he has ill intent, then we will thwart him, just like we did last year. Is everyone in agreement with this plan? Everyone said they were, and the motion was passed unanimously. Very well, then it's agreed. I thank you for your aid in the matter. I know that with your help, we can keep him from mischief. They convened then, and Grandpa wanted to see what sort of defenses they were setting up inside the park. Marcus and John went with him. Randy led them, Sam falling in beside the group, and the lady and her gourdling returned to the greenhouse. Winter made to go. She had appointments to get to, but someone stepped in her path. May I have a moment of your time, sister? She grimaced and crossed her arms. Her brother looked even more conniving than usual. I have clients to attend to, she said, stepping around him. He fell in beside her instead, her teeth coming together in a grimace. Then I will make this fast. It's come to my attention that there might be a threat to your town on the horizon. Her eyebrows went up, and the warden put his hands up defensively. Not from me. It's a threat from the woods. Dr. Winters snorted. As far as gambits go, this is grasping indeed. If something threatened the town, I would know. As you knew last year when the Green Man swooped in. Face it, sister, there are things that happen here that escape your notice. But not yours, she said, turning to face him. Brother, I'm tired of these games. Tell me what you know and what you want. What I want is to help, because this threat has promised to come after your town after my prison is no more. They walked through the gardens, and the warden told her about his encounter with Reese, with the creatures, and how he had acquired the limp that made their progress so slow. Winter listened, Pamela listened, but neither was particularly swayed. She didn't trust her brother, not as far as she could throw him, and when they came to the parking lot, she nodded in the face of his expected silence. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, and we'll keep an eye out for trouble. And the problem? He asked, sounding more desperate than she had ever heard him. Your problem, she corrected. Reese is something you have created, and it's something that you will have to fix. If he comes into my town, I will handle him. Until then, we will patrol our hunting grounds and handle our own skirmishes. Translation: you're on your own. Pamela Winters walked back to her office, leaving her brother to stand there and watch her go. She felt a little sorry for him as he stood there, hoping she would turn back with such force that it was palpable. But she didn't. He had burned his bridges, and she was not in a hurry to rebuild them. So, in summation, it looks like we have ourselves some fun on the 31st. Marcus laughed. Not too much fun, I hope. John, Marcus, Glimmer, and Grandpa were sitting on the back porch and discussing the meeting from earlier that day. Glimmer liked the sound of their defenses and the readiness of the Brandylow and their allies. She also liked the sound of these guardians and wanted to see one while she was there.
They sound amazing.
I saw some of them during the war, Marcus told her. They were pretty cool.
It will be nice to stand beside you in battle, Hunter. I cannot wait to see your powers.
Marcus blushed a little. Well, I hope I live up to the hype, then. I'm not sure how much use I'm gonna be, John admitted, leaning back as he looked up at the stars. I can't really do magic or anything, and I'll have no real fighting skill. Your eyes are what we need, Grandpa said. If we get entangled by something, then we might need you to lead us out. If you can see the spirit world, then you can see through the glamours and illusions that we'll be up against, I bet. That seemed to perk John up a little bit. Yeah, well, that's something, I guess. I'll just have to stay close so that I don't get myself killed. We'll keep you safe, bud, Marcus said. Besides, your magic's coming along. You almost stopped that snowball yesterday. John snorted. I'm not sure the wind didn't shift, but thanks for the pep talk. Hey, so, John stated, taking a swig of his beer as he collected his thoughts, what are the warden and the doctor like when they fight? I heard them talking, and he kept calling her sister. Are they related or something? Oh, yes, Grandpa said, looking at the woods. They're demons, hellspawn, not to be wholly trusted, no matter how they seem. John choked a little on his beer. No way! Are you serious? I've seen her in the hospital. She seems normal enough to me. That's her trap. But to be fair, I don't think she means the town or its people any harm. The warden is another story. He lives off chaos, at least that's what I've heard, and the prison is his feeding ground. Be careful around that one. I wouldn't trust him to draw me a bath, let alone protect my back. Doesn't look like we have much of a choice. We may need him as much as her, if this goes south, Marcus said. They were quiet for a moment as the night went on around them, the quiet winter woods broken only by the stray fall of snow and the odd creature out for a meal. John had to admit he saw the appeal of living out of town, especially when the loudest thing there was a hungry beaver or an eager chipmunk. I suppose there's no sense getting too excited about it, John said. It'll be what it'll be. Grandpa nodded. Always is. The warden made his way into confinement with all the confidence of a king heading to his dungeon. Mobley wasn't here today, which was a blessing, and Sergeant Kiln greeted him with respect. The respect was twinged with fear, as it almost always was, but the warden had come to expect this. Fear was his due, it was his right, and he basked in it. Where is he? He? Kiln asked, not understanding. You know, our silent protester. Oh, him! He's in his cell for the moment. He's certainly causing quite a stir. He's been mechanically fed twice now, you know. He's still wearing the clothes we put on him after the last time. Still hasn't said a word. Won't respond to anything. Never showers. Never eats. Just sits there and stares at the wall. The warden nodded. I want to see him. Kiln shrugged. He's in C4. Let me grab some keys and out. That won't be necessary. I'll speak to him alone, thank you, Sergeant. Kiln started to object, but finally just handed the warden the keys and let him go. He had learned what Mobley refused to, that most of the time it was just best to do what the warden wanted. The warden thanked him, telling him to tell his officers to give him about 20 minutes to speak with the man. As he came onto the quad, he was not subject to any of the hooting or catcalling that some other people might have gotten. He was not questioned about paperwork or toiletries, and most of them knew better than to draw undue attention. When he was in their presence, it was better to be invisible. He approached the cell he wanted, but when he looked in, he found only a haggard mess awaiting him. The inmate inside looked rough, a transformation that had taken about 2 months. His hair was gone, his head perfectly bald, as it had grown and been shaved again and again. He was filthy, his skin appearing tan from the dirt and grime that covered it. The warden could smell some of that filth as it Seemed he was just letting it drop where it may these days. He was thin, weeks of refusing to eat having caught up with him. But his eyes, God, his eyes were the worst. His eyes were crazed, like someone looking through hell's back door, and the warden couldn't say he was surprised. After all, hadn't he been the one to slam that door? Long time no see, Cribs. The man turned his head to look at the door, as if he hadn't banged it open loud enough to wake the dead a moment ago. He mumbled something, probably the first thing he had said in weeks. Pardon? B50967, he rasped, sounding like a rusty spring in an old mattress. Ah, that's right. I almost forgot that you prefer to go by a number than a name. They say you've been causing quite a lot of trouble, though I guess that might be my fault. I didn't play fair in our little deal, but I'm willing to fix it if you're willing to collect your final kill. He looked up, a small amount of interest slipping amongst the distrust. You see, there's someone else I need killed. There's a man threatening my prison and all who live in it. If he's allowed to continue, he will bring about the end of everything I have built here. You will kill him, and our deal is complete. What do you say? Will you kill again for me and fulfill our bargain? He was quiet for a long time, looking at the warden as he stood in the doorway. Why would I believe you? He said, sounding skeptical. Because, Cribs, it's the only chance you have to stalk the world again. So, what's it to be? If I leave you here, I will never make you this offer again. He thought about it, gave it a good chewing over, and when he answered him, he sounded like someone who had settled on suicide. Fine, but after this we're done. I want to leave this place right after and never hear from you again. Fair enough, the warden said. I will call for you tomorrow night. Before I do, be sure you eat, change your clothes, and have a shower. I will expect you at your best when you come to me tomorrow. B50967 just looked at the wall and continued his vigil. The warden was about to close the door again when he heard that same rusty voice ask a question from the depths of the darkness. Did you really intend to play fair with me? They arrived at the park at 11 o'clock on December 31st. The warden was the first to arrive, appearing near the gate a moment before an old battered truck pulled into the parking lot. Grandpa and his entourage got out, John having ridden with them, and as they approached the warden, Dr. Winters and Maggie walked from the street side and came around the wall of the botanical garden. They all came face to face more or less at the same time, and there was a strange sense of déjà vu as they stood in the place they had done battle a year ago. This must have been how Civil War veterans would have felt if they had visited Gettysburg, and many of them could identify the locations of skirmishes. There was still a stain here, a dent there where a foe had fallen or wounds had been taken, and a hush resided over them as they took it all in. Never would have thought of all of us coming back here again, Marcus said, especially not on New Year's. That's for sure, Dr. Winters said, turning as the gates creaked open. Tobias, Sam, and Randy had left their togas off today, and all were sporting armor of some sort or another. Sam and Randy had opted for Kevlar, their hair poking out of the vests and their cuffs of the BDU pants they wore. But Tobias had put on something that made him look like a Roman centurion. The breastplate appeared to be beaten copper, the skirt that went with it was armored with bits of ornament, and his hooves were bare to the night. Randy had his cudgel, his sign of office, and Sam had one to go along with the riot guns that they wore over their shoulders. Tobias had a short sword on his hip and a small knife opposite it. "Come on, then," Randy said, motioning with a gloved hand. "She's expecting you." The garden grounds were quiet, the small lights casting pools of illumination amongst the gloom. The wind pushed garbage around, scuttling it eerily across the pavement, and no one in attendance seemed immune to the feeling of apprehension that moved through them. This place might soon be another battleground, and none of them were in any hurry to see it. The trees from the Christmas lighting stood tall and foreboding, and as they came to the lily pond, they saw that a table had been set up. It was oddly fragile-looking, spindle-legged and thin, and upon it sat a pair of silver pins, and not much else. The lady was standing behind it, looking at it the way most people look at poisonous insects. "Good. You've all arrived. Thank you again for coming. He should be here soon, so take up positions nearby, just in case. Dr. Winters, you and the warden are capable of glamour, so I would like you close by and unseen. Can you do that?" As if in answer, Dr. Winter was suddenly gone. "Like this?" she asked, and Maggie couldn't seem to find her. "Perfect. Magus, you and your friend with the sight move towards the 11 o'clock position and hide. Your apprentice and his companion should go towards the 1 o'clock position and do the same. Marguerite, there is a ledge above the lily pond that I would like you to take a position on. It would be an easy leap to the table if something went wrong. Randy, you and Sam go to the gate and see if he's arrived yet. Tobias, stay with me. Are we all clear on what to do if something happens?" "The same thing we did last year, I assume," Grandpa said, and the lady nodded. "Good. Get in your positions and be ready for anything. I do not believe for a moment that he intends to play fair." "Before we depart," the warden said, "I need to speak with you on it," but the lady raised a hand. "There'll be time for that later. The hour is drawing close, and we have to be ready." As if to accentuate this, the snow around them began to flurry, and a low sort of ground fog began to rise. They all departed for their assigned places, the warden disappearing with a grimace. The lady steeled herself, feeling the apprehension take root again. If he was serious, then she owed it to herself and her people to be open to the idea. He had never suggested anything like this before, and it made her uneasy. The green man did not surrender, he did not negotiate, and he certainly did not speak of peace. This had to be something, a trick, some sort of plan of attack, but she couldn't see how. As the mist swirled around her, she heard his footsteps before she saw him. The clump of metal on stone was all the warning she needed, and when he came into view, the moonlight playing off his mossy armor, she was again aware of how big he was. He was closer to 7 feet than 6, and even unarmed he looked formidable. Randy and Sam were not small, but they seemed like children. They had their cudgels out, herding him like a cow to the chute, and when he saw her there, he seemed to grin. "My lady," he purred, coming towards her as her brandy-loaf followed close behind. Someone coughed not far off, and she hoped he wouldn't notice. "I trust I haven't kept you waiting long," he said as he swaggered over to the table. "Long enough. But then she noticed that he wasn't alone. In his wake came a smaller figure, more normal in stature. He walked like an imp, coming along behind some great demon, but he didn't seem overly thrilled to be here. The suit he had worn had likely once been very nice, but it was dirty and torn now, and his top hat looked more like a discarded soup can. His eyes darted around, unsure, untrusting, and the lady wasn't quite sure what to make of him. "I believe your terms were that you would come alone." The green man snorted, and it sounded odd in his helmet. "Because you most certainly have come alone, have you not?" he said, indicating the two Brandula who followed. "This is my new friend. He doesn't say much, but I do love him. He has come to witness our palaver." The lady looked at him, but the man seemed more interested in his shoes than her. The mist and the snow were coming in, even thicker than before, and the lady wanted to finish their business before he brought a blizzard in with him. "Very well, then. Let's get this over with. Present your—" But she felt her teeth come together as something slid across her senses. Something was whistling, not the usual wind through the trees keening that she was accustomed to. What is that?" she whispered, and she could tell that she wasn't the only one that it bothered. Sam and Randy were wincing as they came behind him, staggering a little as the whistling warped around them. It was sharp, like the biting of a winter wind, and she could feel it like an ice pick in her brain. "Stop that," she half whispered, swaying a little. "Stop what? What is it that troubles you, my lady?" the green man asked. She was shaking. Something wasn't right. She was under attack. It was happening right now, and there was nothing that she could do to stop it. The trees were rustling around her. The pines were whispering dark, cold words. And beneath it all was something stranger than the keening of this new enemy. It sounded like the whisper of a cornfield. The lady tried to set her defenses against the incursion, but it had come too quickly. Whenever she tried to raise some sort of alarm, to raise a shield or a mental barrier, that damn whistling would snap across her and make her lose the course of her thoughts. She reached for a sword and remembered that she had come unarmed as well. They had been here for peace talks, but it appeared that the trap she had suspected had been real. She shook herself, and there he was. He rose up before her like a ghost from a tomb, and when his hand came out towards her, she jittered away. She could hear the people that she had brought with her coming out of concealment, but when the green man staggered away, she could see the warden as he took on his more monstrous aspect. His sister wasn't far behind, her humanity a little harder to shed than it seemed her brother's was. He was inches from his demonic nature, and she was always trying to lose hers. The two of them pushed the green man back, but as the lady backed into the lily pond, she could feel movement in the depths. She turned, and there, rising like a colossus of weeds and wet, was some kind of plant creature. It was amorphous, its body an amalgamation of roots and stalks, and that form was opening up as if to swallow her whole. When it ran into a glowing dome of energy that had sprung up between her and it, the creature seemed confused. Maggie came howling down onto the corn creature, sending it teetering into the water with a splash. The feral vixen was on it now, tearing great chunks from it with her bare hands, but those tendrils and roots took their own toll on her as well. They tore at her, cutting lines across her alabaster skin, but for every cut and every abrasion, she dealt them a wound in kind. She gripped at the vines and the roots and the tendrils of green, and the beast roared in agony at her touch, right up until it threw her off, and the bulk of it came to rest on top of Maggie as it shoved her beneath the pond. The lady stumbled forward, wanting to help, but it was unnecessary. With a feral screech, Glimmer hit the thing and sent it staggering away as Maggie surfaced with a loud and hungry gasp. The two fought off the creature, sending those lashing vines to float on the water. Glimmer had a pair of serrated knives, their blades dribbling chlorophyll, and as the whistling continued to assault her, the lady turned to check on her enemy. She saw the green man as he fought the demonic twins, and for a moment she believed they might push him back. The two had taken hunks out of his emerald armor, the creature struggling to keep them at bay, and his hellish eyes came to rest on her just as Pamela Winters hit him again with a long, delicate claw. He clearly had not expected her to be so well guarded, and the lady hoped for a moment that they might win out. Then she remembered the ragged man, the one who looked like a midway hawker, like a sideshow ringmaster, like some ragged barker, and the green man remembered him too. "Now! Do it now, you fool!" The man looked unsure, unwilling, but as he closed his eyes, the lady felt something more devious than the mist and the fog crest over her. She felt it, saw it affect her friends and allies, saw them fall back as whatever it was came into play, and then saw nothing but the blackness as the creature opened its coils and enveloped her. He was standing in an old slaughterhouse, the one that had been on his uncle's property when he was a kid. The meat hooks still hung from the ceiling. The floor was still the burnt red of old blood, and even though he could see the sun through the hole in the ceiling, he felt a cold chill creep up inside of him. His cousins had told him what lived here. It was the same pig creature that had killed the old butcher when he lived here. It was the same strange combination of pig and man, and its favorite thing to eat was little boys. The piggy man would get him, but they had said that if he escaped the piggy man, then he could join their special club. He was only 9, but he really wanted to join that club, so he'd agreed to this rite of initiation that they had all sworn to have done before him. As a much younger John stared at the dark depths of the back room, he could hear the snorting and the rooting of some massive pig creature as it prepared to come after him. Except, no, he didn't really see those things. It was hard to explain, but it was like looking at a particularly good illusion. He could see the dingy shack, hear the piggy man as it went about its work, smell the old leaves and the dry rot that fought for supremacy with the scent of old blood, taste the tang of fear as it tried to take hold, but he could also see through it. As the piggy man came out of the dark back room, something that he remembered hadn't happened in real life, he found that he could see through him too. It charged him, cleaver raised, but it all passed right through as it swung that big blade down, and John walked through him and out of the dingy shack and into reality. John was standing beside Grandpa, the old man shaking and mumbling as he lived out his own nightmares. No, I won't jump. No, I said I won't. John had put a hand on his shoulder. Gramps, it's not real. Snap out of it. I don't want to. I'll die. I won't jump. I won't. You can't. Gramps, he said, shaking him a little harder. The old man's eyes came open, slowly, and he looked around like someone coming out of a dream. John, what the hell happened? I don't know, but we need to find the others. They moved slowly through the mist, not sure what to expect, and John realized that the whistling had ceased. Thank God, that had been horrible. Whatever it was, it had gotten into his head and done a number on him. He hoped they wouldn't find what had made that whistling sound as they went through the thick mist, and he saw Grandpa reach out a wrinkled hand and push it away. John could see the pond ahead, but there were shapes around it, slowly writhing, and they made a beeline for them. They came across Dr. Winters and the warden first, but it was the thrashing of the water that caught John's attention. Glimmer and Maggie were in the lily pond, fighting to keep their heads above the water as they were assaulted by whatever nightmare held them. Glimmer seemed to be doing okay, but Maggie was thrashing and coughing like she couldn't catch her breath. I'll help them, John said to Gramps. You see if you can help these two get back on their feet. Gramps nodded as John ran to the water and tried to pull Maggie out. Glimmer was starting to get a handle on whatever it was she was seeing, and when Maggie's hand latched around John's wrist, he jumped like he'd been struck. He looked down into her inhuman eyes, her too pale skin, and suddenly felt like he might be back in the dream again. He was floaty, feeling off kilter, and when she reached up to stroke his cheek, it felt really good. "Come, come, darling. Let me have a taste." Her mouth opened, and John was suddenly staring into a maw of sharp teeth with a lashing tongue in its midst. He realized the trap, but his mind was slow to come back from it. He was pulling back, trying to get loose, but he was like a child pulling against a parent. He was losing the fight, getting yanked closer to that gaping mouth and those two deep eyes, and when he slipped and fell into the water, he could feel her tower over him. "Don't fight this, darling. I won't take much." Her hands opened like a trap suddenly, and John shook his head as Glimmer clamped onto the creature and pulled her back.
"Run, John!"
She had her arm in its mouth, her muscles standing out as she pulled it back, and John was splashing out of the pond as he came back to the shore. Glimmer was thrashing and splashing, trying to keep Maggie's teeth out of her arm, and Maggie was screeching as she reached for John while he got as far away as he could. Someone stepped past him, making him jump, and as Dr. Winters entered the water, the vampire turned her full attention on her. Her inhuman face sagged a little, seeming to understand that she was being seen for what she really was. Her hands were still reaching for John, though the movement was less coordinated. Winter bent down and took those hands, murmuring to Glimmer to let her go, and as she came free, the two embraced in the water. "Pam," the vampire said, half crying, but Winter soothed her as she stroked her wet hair. "I am so sorry. Shh, it's okay. No harm done. It's over now. You're safe." The two embraced as Glimmer went to go find Marcus, and John tried to get his heartbeat back under control. It's been so long since I had a dream like that. I did not miss it." John turned to see the warden rubbing his head as he sat up, his pinstripe suit distinctly ruffled. Glimmer came back with Marcus, a bruise on the side of his face, making John think he had fallen onto it, and the brandy-low came on as they got to their feet as well. Everyone was looking around like they weren't sure what to make of it all. They started looking for damages and things that were missing, and as Winter and Maggie came out of the pond, Sam finally found what was gone. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice sounding suddenly scared. "Who?" Marcus asked, coughing as he leaned against his fiancée. "The lady. She's gone." They found him not far from the pond, but of the lady there was no sign. She was gone, but Randy and Sam dragged the man in the shabby suit to the guard shack so they could interrogate him. Grandpa and Marcus came along too, wanting to help, but the doctor and the warden stayed outside, Maggie not feeling capable of being around flesh and blood people yet. John probably wasn't helping by sitting out there, having a smoke that he had stolen off of Randy, and Glimmer was keeping an eye on him as she glowered at the vampiress. The barker sat slumped in the hot seat, looking down as he endured their anger. "I'm getting pretty tired of asking, so I suggest you come out with it. Where's the lady?" The barker shook his head. "I don't know." He put his hands up immediately to stop the coming cries of bullshit. "I wasn't told where we were going, only that he needed my abilities. If I helped him, he said he would free me again, so I could roam. I didn't know where we were going or what we were doing, I swear." Randy looked over at Sam, but the brandy-low just shrugged. "Where do you think he took her?" Sam asked. "Somewhere cold," the barker said. "I do know why he took her, though." "Why?" Randy asked, leaning close. The barker looked up, and Sam could see no lie on his face. He was clearly different than the others that he had come with, and he believed that he felt bad about what had happened. He wanted his freedom, though, and that was something they could all understand. At the end of the day, those who are indentured, even kindly so, long for freedom. Every year, the Green Man has his followers bring him back to something more corporeal. Every year, he walks the earth until spring. Every year, he is made insubstantial again. He wants what your lady has. He wants to be whole again and not suffer the whims of fate when the season is right. He has taken her so that he can get that which he desires. He wants to be alive. That shut them all up, and when Grandpa whistled, it was the first sound they had heard in some time. "How will we find her?" Randy asked. "I may have a solution," said Tobias, as he came in from the greenhouse. He had the Gordling with him, the poor creature looking distressed and unhappy, and when he set it down, it began to turn and look for its mistress. As creepy as Sam sometimes found it, he had to admit that the sight of it like that made him a little sad. "What? You want him to sniff her out?" "I do. He has a spark of the lady's power in him, a fairly recent spark at that. Also, I think he would like to help. He's been inconsolable for the last hour." "Well, he can come with me then," Randy said, "'cause I'm going to find her." Sam and Tobias objected. "Randy, you can't just go off like this. God knows what's waiting for you out there." "I've got to do something. She was counting on me to keep her safe, and I failed. Now it's up to me to get her back." "Then I'm coming too," Sam said, but Randy shook his head. "Nope, I'm the head of security. It needs to be me. Sam, you have to keep this place secure while I'm gone, and also go speak to the Fey courts on our behalf. Tobias, you have to run this place while I'm gone. We have to keep this place going, for her sake. Also sounds like, if I don't find her before spring, I could be in a pickle." "I'll come with you," said a voice, and they all turned to look at the barker. "My ass you will. This is as much your fault as his." "I feel terrible about it. I want to help. I have no loyalty to the Green Man. He brought me here against my will, and if I can help you with this, I want to help get her back." Randy drew in a breath and sighed. "Okay, I suppose I can't really turn down help right now, but you mind me," he said, looming over the man once again. "If I so much as think you're going to betray me, I'll cave your head in and leave you in a ditch. Are we clear?" The barker nodded. "You won't have to. If he discovers I'm helping you, he might do it for you, and I'm fully aware of that." They exited not long after, Dr. Winters growling when she saw the barker. She hadn't seen him yet. She had been too busy with Maggie, but now that her girlfriend was a little less blood-crazed, she got up and approached the man. "I might have known it would be you. I should have squashed you when I had the chance." But Randy put a hand out to stop her. "He did this under duress, apparently. He has offered to help. If he can help us get her back, then I might need him. You can always squash him when we get back." Dr. Winters glowered at the barker before scoffing and walking away. "Maggie and I are heading home. If you all need anything, you know how to contact us. I'm sorry about what happened. Your lady, I hope you find her." The warden took his leave not long after that. "I suppose you won't need any sacrifices for a while," he said. And when Tobias nodded, the old devil added, "I'll continue to send details down here to help clean up. It looks good on our taxes and such." Then he was away too, one of his problems seemingly having fixed itself, for now. "You know how to reach us too," Marcus said, offering them a hand. "If you need help, we'll be here." "Yes," Grandpa added. "Count on it," John said, and the group took their leave as well. So, the Kashmir Botanical Gardens started the new year without its patron, and Randy sat out in the unlikely company of the Barker and the little Gordling to find her. The others tried their best to return to a state of normalcy, while everyone else tried to forget what had happened on the worst New Year's Eve they had spent at the garden. All of them secretly hoped, as they tried to return to their lives, that it wouldn't be the last time they had reason to be there, and wished Randy good luck on his quest. The little town of Kashmir slept with its secrets that night, and those who were not privy to them slept the night through and were happier for it.